Should we begin, John, or what do you think?
I think so, yes. I think we have our committee and design members here and present, and we have the design team on, development team. I think we can kick it off.
Awesome. So good afternoon. I'm Josh Sun, along with John Law, and we're with the Department of Planning and Development. Welcome to the March 8th, 2023 meeting of the Committee on Design. Please be advised that this meeting is being recorded and live streamed to DPD's YouTube page. To our esteemed committee, thank you for volunteering your time to be a part of this advisory group. To the members of the public who are joining us, what you will see today and at future Committee on Design meetings are projects currently under review by DPD staff. The committee is a voluntary advisory body of design professionals that provide their expertise on design issues. This committee is not a substitute for Plan Commission, as it is not a forum for public debate, nor is the advice of the committee legally binding. It is the hope that today's discourse will lead to recommendations that will elevate the design excellence of the city of Chicago. These recommendations will be forwarded to DPD staff for consideration as they review these projects for Plan Commission and subsequent approvals. I will now continue on to the roll call. Please state present or here if you are in attendance. Sarah Beardsley.
Present.
Brian Lee.
Here.
Juan Moreno.
Present.
John Ronan.
Here.
Leslie Roth.
Here.
Anna Ishikawa.
Present.
Arnold Mitchell.
Here.
And then I believe Guacolda is out, correct, Sean?
That's correct, yep.
Okay. Before we get to the agenda, to members of the public, you are welcome to begin submitting comments and questions through the Q&A box. Committee members are invited to review this information during and after each presentation and incorporate the comments into the discussion. We will not be reviewing questions or comments from the public individually, but we'll be recording them for use when reviewing the project. We'll now move on to the first item on the agenda. And feel free to go ahead and pull up the presentation. 1300 West Lake Street, that team.
Yeah.
So yes. Okay. So I'm just going to give a little summary of the project and then we'll continue. 1300 West Lake is a proposed plan development for a 51,141 square foot site located at the corner of West Lake Street and North Elizabeth Street. The applicant is proposing to rezone the subject property from M2-3 Light Industry District to DX-7 Downtown Mixed Use District, and then to a residential business plan development. They are proposing the construction of a 46-story, 530-foot tall mixed-use building containing 593 dwelling units with about 10,000 square feet of ground floor commercial space, 371 accessory parking spaces, and 777 bicycle parking spaces. A bonus in floor area ratio of 4.5 will be taken, and the overall FAR of the plan development will be 11.5. To any committee members who are associated with this project, if you have not yet, please recuse yourself at this time and for the duration of the review for this project. To the presenters, please clearly state your name and your relation to the project prior to speaking. You have about 15 to 20 minutes to present your proposal. I'll be keeping time. Committee members, please hold your comments and questions until after the presentation. Please proceed with the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. This is Angela Spadoni. I'm from BKL Architecture, working on the design of the project that Josh just explained. A couple of the stats have been updated to only reflect the site that we're looking at on the corner of Lake and Elizabeth. So it's a 46-story tower with 593 units, 356 parking spaces, and 593 bicycle parking stalls as well. So the design we're going to take you through today, and I'll explain further on the design, but we really worked a lot with the city on this design, and we have reflected a lot of the comments that we've received. We really wanted to think about the building composition, activation and interaction with the public realm was a big focus of our design, and then tenant health and wellness and really getting outdoor space and that interaction between indoor and outdoor into the design as well. As we know, sustainability is a big focus of design today and is something we have to think of from step one. So we have been thinking about sustainability. We are aiming to achieve Green Globes level 2 certification. We're looking to limit the percentage of vision glass and to reduce heat loss and summer solar gain. Bird-friendly design, a lot of bike-friendly focus, electrical vehicle charging stations, and automated building systems for efficient controls. And then again, with the site design, we are looking to really incorporate a lot of green space and landscaping, and then as well as shade, and thinking about where sun is on the podium, as well as the pedestrian public realm as well. So just situating everyone to the site, again, 1300 Lake, it's at the corner of Lake and Elizabeth. You can see here that we are in between two pink and green line, the Ashland and the Morgan station, and then as well as just south of our metro lines, and then west of the highway. Currently zoned M2-3, upzoning to a DX7, as Josh had indicated. And we do qualify as a DSL. So looking at our building in white here on the project site, as well as some of the other proposed contextual building, you can see that we are responding to the scale that is happening in the neighborhood, and that we're going to be fitting in with the proposed construction coming to the area. Zooming in a little bit to understand the adjacent development, most important, we have to the west, 1338 West Lake. We definitely looked at this in considering design, but we also looked at 225 Elizabeth, as well as 1353 West Fulton, in terms of where they're adding open space to make sure that we're continuing what's happening and responding to what's being proposed in the neighborhood. Again, zooming in a little bit closer to the site along Lake and Elizabeth, I think this just really emphasizes that Elizabeth is really our main corridor to that pedestrian connection from Randolph Street and the heavy pedestrian focus that Randolph has. So we really took that into consideration, really focused on that corner, which you'll see in the design. Some of the existing site conditions, I think everyone knows Peoria Meats, and that's what's currently there. So that's what the site kind of is known for. There are some current existing curb cuts that I'm going to talk about along Lake and along Elizabeth, as well as our adjacency to the Lake L. So we have settled on two different exterior design alternatives. The massing remains the same in both, but we're working through some ideas still on the exterior expression. So we are going to present two to you today. This is the southeast perspective view. So you have the L tracks in our foreground, and then Elizabeth is kind of down at the bottom right corner of the screen. So overall, this first, we're looking at an expression of a vertical and horizontal for each of the massing volumes that we're showing. We're cutting back and stepping back along at the top of the tower. This is in response to some comments from DPD. And we're using a masonry and metal expression at the podium. We'll talk about kind of the materiality of the building further on in the presentation. Alternate 2 is a variation, still a metal and glass building, a more vertical design, still some variation between each of the volumes, which I'll talk about later. A similar masonry expression and metal at the podium. Just so we will talk again through this a bit more further on in the design, but just wanted to give you an overview to start. Looking at the site plan, I think what's most important here is just seeing the amount of kind of open green space, open to the sky space we've given to the project. We thought this made the most sense along Elizabeth. Obviously, Lake is not the most pleasant experience. We are not turning our backs to Lake, as you'll see in our ground floor plan, but we felt that where it makes most sense to include pedestrian space is a bit buffered from the L. So on the north side of the site, and then along Elizabeth. You can see here that there's a lot of deck space, a lot of outdoor deck space, a lot of different terraces. That's going to be for the residents, and then also our ground floor pedestrian open space that Matt will talk to a bit more in the presentation. Looking at the ground floor space, I think one of the main things we did in response to some city comments as well is we removed all curb cuts along Elizabeth and Lake. So there are existing curb cuts there, and we are not even utilizing the existing ones. All of our access for residential parking, retail parking, loading, and drop off is happening along the public alley. We thought with a building of 593 units that it is very important to have a safe and effective way to drop off. With the increase of Ubers and different Uber Eats, we really wanted to make sure that that traffic wasn't happening along Elizabeth, which is a kind of a quieter street. So by having that access come off the alley, creating this vehicular piazza, really gets all of that drop-off activity off of the street. We also wanted to emphasize the public realm as well and the pedestrian uses, making sure it's safe And we have ideas for having that adjacent to the piazza, even spilling into the piazza at some moments. You're also seeing that we have ground floor retail. We wanted to hold the corner, continuing on that activation of retail off Randolph along Elizabeth and Lake. You can see that we added some articulation to the facade along Lake Street. You'll see this in some renderings. There are some design moves we're doing at the top of the tower that we wanted to also bring down to the pedestrian experience. And then the lobby is coming off of that vehicular piazza. And then you're also seeing we're having some ground floor parking. Jumping back really quick, I forgot to mention that I wanted to say that we did position our tower as far east as possible in response to the Cedar Street proposal to our west. So thinking about that tower separation and making sure that we're responding to some of the other towers that are proposed in the neighborhood. We wanted to hold the corner with our tower, but we did pull back to help open up that public realm, that ground. So this is just a diagram showing some of that street activation. Again, that thoroughfare from Randolph along Elizabeth, really activating that podium with retail frontage all the way lining Lake as well. Again, not turning our backs to Lake. And then having the active use of our residential lobby off of Elizabeth and really activating this as an urban plaza. The massing and composition that we chose was kind of pushing and pulling at the two volumes. Instead of having the volumes oriented at 90 degrees, which is pretty standard, we actually decided to splay them open a bit. This is also thinking about designing the building from inside out and making sure that those inner corners get more views to the city and aren't looking directly into each other. It also really gives a really interesting juxtaposition against the very stark grid of the West Loop. We looked at adding some textural expression to the top of the tower. We started with this just at the top of the tower, and in response to some of our sessions with DPD, we have now shown it on both the east and west. And we have also brought this expression now down towards the podium so that it's not only noticeable and unique from far away, but that's also something that the pedestrian public realm will interact with, so that it's tying it together to make a cohesive design. These are some of the West Loop design guidelines that we responded to. Obviously, we really take those into consideration when we're designing, thinking about the scale of the podium, keeping that low, activating the retail, which I talked about. Number 4 is holding that corner, although we did pull in to really allow space for that public realm to exist. We looked a lot at stepping back the tower at the top and creating a very unique design condition at the top as well. I'm now going to hand it over to Matt. He's going to talk about the landscape and public realm, and then I'll take back over and talk about the exterior facade materials when he's finished.
Great. Thanks, Angela. So here we have an overall site plan that includes the streetscape frontage along Lake and Elizabeth, as well as the shared piazza space to the northeast and a dog run located along the alley. Lake Street, of course, has the overhead L tracks that Angela mentions and creates a lot of noise and shade. And so the design for the site is really intended to mitigate that by providing a dynamic and verdant streetscape experience both along Lake and Elizabeth. And really kind of locating the primary pedestrian area in the northeast corner, kind of separated by the architectural volume to make that a bit more pleasant of an experience to hang out. Next slide. So zooming in a bit here, you'll see that the landscape begins to pick up on the angular partie of the architecture and really breaks it down to more of a pedestrian scale. A few key zones here: the piazza to the north, we're calling the oasis in the center, covered retail seating space to the south. The streetscape along both Lake and Elizabeth use the typical 25 feet on center tree spacing required by the landscape ordinance, but they use this angular parkway planting motif that ebbs and flows a bit to create a more dynamic experience. It's also what our firm is also working on the Cedar Street proposal next door, which is doing something similar to kind of carry that continuity through. And then along Elizabeth, a staggered row of tree planters is used to edge the piazza space to create a bit of an alley to walk through instead of just trees to walk by. The piazza space is designed as a shared vehicular and pedestrian space that's flexible enough to accommodate drop-off day to day, but can easily be closed off to host things like farmers markets and small community events on the weekends. The Oasis is a terrace space that overlooks that piazza, and it features trees that emerge out of the paving with movable planters and seating below. And then the retail seating area is a covered space that combines some integral planters and movable tables or integral benches and movable tables to create something that really looks sculptural and inviting, whether busy or not. Next slide. So this is a view at the Elizabeth streetscape looking north. And here you can see that tree alley effect that I mentioned on the last slide. It really creates kind of this inviting corridor along Elizabeth. You can see our intent here as well as to have this really richly textured planting below to create sort of a garden-like atmosphere. And our intent is to also use primarily native and adaptive plantings where we can to reduce maintenance and water needs and really provide a range of seasonal interest. Next slide. So this is a view of the Oasis zone, which shows the movable seating and movable planters beneath the tree canopy that create this welcoming experience pulled away from the L to relax. And so you can see a bit of the retail seating also on the left that's nestled behind those plantings to create this sort of immersive experience separated from the sidewalk. Next slide. And this view at Elizabeth looking south highlights the fact that we have some built-in public seating elements, some of which face the street, others that face the piazza area. And as you can see, pedestrians can easily kind of flow in and out of that piazza space and across the sidewalk through the breaks in the planters. So it's intended to create this really kind of open, kind of transparent space. Next slide. Then this is a view looking at the northeast corner of the piazza in the kind of typical day-to-day condition as a drop-off. We've left this corner open deliberately to create a portal into the space for both vehicles and pedestrians. And then on the next slide, we are showing a farmer's market condition. So you can see how easily this could be closed off on weekends to really create this nice community amenity and become really an asset to the neighborhood. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to Angela, who's going to walk through some of the facade options.
Thanks, Matt. So continuing on to the pedestrian realm and looking at that landscape space in alongside the architecture, our two options we're looking at here is this first alternate. We looked at bringing some vertical element, bringing the tower down to the ground and using some screening elements over the garage area, as you're seeing here with some spandrel glass, and then really highlighting that active amenity space on the third level and really highlighting the active lobby space on ground and kind of letting it be a quieter expression where the parking is. The alternate two, we are seeing more of a vertical expression in the tower. We're looking at integrating some paneling in a more artistic design and letting that take on the form of some of the serration that you're seeing in larger moves around the building. Just talking about kind of looking at the massing and seeing where we're applying different materials. So what we're looking at in this first alternate is a horizontal metal panel expression on the east volume, and then a more vertical metal panel expression on the west. And where these are either carved back or articulated at the top, it goes to a more glassy expression. We are still using spandrel glass to reduce the amount of vision, but a more simpler, cleaner expression where the form starts to take on the articulation within itself. The podium is looking at using metal and brick. This is in response to our proximity to the L. We did want to look at sound absorptive materials, and we know that a masonry expression is going to help with that and not just reflect all the sound. So we are thinking about that in the podium. We also looked at bird-friendly sign material in terms of fritted glass or less reflective glass, not only at the podium, because we are sheltered by the L there, but also at our amenity terraces and where there might be some landscaping that's incorporated there as well. In elevation, you can see this alternate one. Again, here you could really see the expression of the horizontal and the vertical. The other thing that we looked at with DPD is the expression at the top of the tower. We are looking at using a screen around the mechanical to really emphasize the serration that is in the design, so that when you're looking up from the tower, that really is emphasized with that screen. Again, you're seeing the quieter glacier expression where the tower takes on more, the form takes on more movement itself. And then the more textured horizontal and vertical expression in the tower, transitioning to the masonry podium. Zooming into that podium, you're seeing that there is the masonry piers that are inset with the metal panel on the horizontal. And then in relationship to the L, you can see that we really thought about getting over the L with any of our active uses. So we did build that up in the parking podium, and then to get that amenity activity above the L, and then also activating the ground floor or below, leaving that as a very glassy expression. Zooming in on each of the expressions, and this alternate one, we're looking at kind of a projecting horizontal or vertical metal panel depending on which volume you're looking at. Either the horizontal is projecting on the east volume or the vertical is projecting on the west volume. We're looking at a textured metal panel in the opposite orientation with vision glass, and then also where the sections where the massing takes on more texture to let that be quieter with vision and spandrel glass. Both podiums use a similar expression. I talked about the masonry piers, some translucent spandrel glass with a metal screen kind of hiding that garage, and then also using that textured metal screen at the podium as well. So for alternate 2, we are taking away the horizontal expression, and this is a version that's only showing that vertical expression. Again, you're still seeing a similar podium with the masonry expression, and then at the top, you're seeing that screen to emphasize the serration that's happening. Let me switch here. Zooming in, what we looked at doing here is actually using a formed metal panel that also beckons back to that overall massing serration we used. What we're varying here between the 2 volumes is the density of the vertical metal panel, as well as the spacing. So you're seeing here on the west volume that we're doubling up that expression and then doing wider windows. And then on the east volume, it's a little bit of a narrow expression with a single metal panel expression. Zooming into the alternate 2 podium, what we're looking at here again is a more artistic kind of expressed metal panel that's formed and is looking at that serration that's happening along the retail at the top of the tower. And then it's a quieter expression on the volume that's coming over to introduce and to accent the residential entrance. We are looking at using signage on this middle tier as well to really emphasize where the residential entrance is. This is just some facade precedents. What we wanted to show here is that we're looking at kind of that textured, the textured in the full glazing portions where we're using a combination of spandrel and vision. And we also have our Sears tower as well. And then another, the Avery by OMA as some of our facade precedents. You're seeing the metal panel precedents at the bottom of the page. And what we're looking at here is a metal panel tone. Not the actual metal, but kind of something that is beckoning back to this kind of softer bronze coloring that you're seeing in the lower images. So this is where the northeast perspective, where you're all kind of seeing those 2 volumes come together and each of the different options. You're also seeing that serration happening at the top of the tower, as well as pulled down to the residential entry, so that it's expressed at both the top and the pedestrian experience. You're seeing how the volume on the east is cutting back and kind of really creating a unique edge on that northeast corner. And then the alternate 2, which is looking at the more vertical expression with the variation of the metal panel density on both the east and the west volume, and how that's coming down into the podium that we looked at. And again, the difference of the more glassy volume at the pedestrian experience, and then also at the top. We also integrated balconies at the top when we worked with DPD and carving back that tower. So that's kind of happening at what we're calling this uppermost tier. This is the west view, or west looking east, and then you're seeing that expansive amenity deck and podium, and then kind of that unique west view of the serration happening at the top of the tower in alternate 1, and then the more vertical expression in alternate 2. These are just our floor plans I included mainly for reference if a question came up, but we are trying to obviously be as efficient as possible with our parking. We're kind of low and spreading that out, helping us get those active uses above that out track. a lot of indoor amenity on that lower level amenity deck, and then a lot of outdoor additional amenity deck excavation and vegetation there. Kind of our typical plan, you see how we splayed the tower opening, the views really helping relieve those inner corner units. It's often very challenging to lay out. And then the upper tier, introducing more residential amenity at the top. And then the uppermost tier, it goes to full residential levels. And then here's just a program section. So you're seeing kind of everything we talked through, the residential and retail at the podium, parking, upper level amenity, well, lower level amenity on level 5, and then the upper level also at level 40, where we introduce the tower setback, and then residential happening in between. And then, yes, lots of sun studies to understand where we should most place our podium, thinking about separation from the tower to the west, as I already spoke about, and kind of just studying those as well. So now we can move on to questions. Thank you.
Thank you. So, committee members, the floor is now yours for comments and questions to the applicant team. Please raise your Zoom hand if we will call on you. Yes or no?
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. And Angela and Matthew, thank you for your presentation. And I apologize in advance. I'm getting over a bout of laryngitis, so my voice is not the strongest right now. So I'll try to project as much as I can. Before I ask a question, Angela, can you take a moment to talk about proximity to mass transit and what TSL bonuses if any were leveraged?
Yeah.
In the proposal.
Sure. Let me just go back. So in terms of TSL bonuses, I mean, we did look at, we are making a parking reduction versus what's required in the DX7. We are not taking that full reduction due to the fact that, we think that we're serving the community and what's needed with this 593 units in addition to the retail. But mainly we are taking that reduced parking ratio down from that what's required in DX7 from 0.7 to about 0.53. In terms of other bonuses related to TSL, Katie, I don't know if we're taking anything else other than just that reduced parking.
Okay, no, thank you. So a couple of thoughts. I don't know if I'll call them questions, more so thoughts. So with respect to the vehicular piazza, I guess in kind of listening to your oratory, you made mention of a desire to obviously pull cars into the site in a safe way, and it seems to me that Matthew, turning to you, that may be that aspiration may be at odds with this notion of this multi-use combo pedestrian vehicular piazza that can flex and open and close, just given the amount of vehicular volume that Angela made reference to. I guess I question whether or not in reality you'll achieve the aspirational desire that's been articulated for that space. I guess the other thing, in looking at very briefly the sun study, the renderings kind of imply a quality of sunlit, and daylit space that I wonder, whether or not you're going to actually achieve, not just, with, the shadow that may be cast by your own structure, but just in the volume of development, and the verticality, of the development, in the surrounding and neighboring Fulton Market, districts. So if the two of you want to, kind of talk about that and respond to that, I appreciate it.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's a valid concern, and it's something we've been discussing with DPD as well. I think there their concern as well as ours was not making a space that really feels like a vehicular drop-off, as it were, where it's really intended only for cars and a really clearly sort of articulated vehicle route. We wanted it to really feel like this could be a space that, both pedestrians and vehicles could occupy, even if that simultaneously, as I mentioned, be roped off for an event or that sort of a thing to happen. But we really wanted to just take away the idea that it looks like a cul-de-sac in the middle of the space and really feel like a more open pedestrian experience. And I guess, Angela, if you want to weigh in on.
No, yeah, I mean, I understood. I understand the concern. I mean, yeah, I think it's just really I think the success here is getting those curb cuts off the street, getting the access off the alley, getting that vehicular circulation to happen internally on the site. This is a big site, so we have the space to do it. We don't always have the space. So I think that that's great that our client is encouraging that as well. Having that open to the sky, not having it all covered. We are partially covered for protection purposes, but are really allowing that open space to be truly open. And the concern about public safety, I mean, it's going to be a management, something that we have to think about in a management terms and the use of that. But it's an idea, and I think it's interesting and strong, and it's great that we're getting to have this much open space on an urban site.
Juan, would you like to say your comment?
Yeah, thanks, Josh, and thanks for the presentation. I just follow up with Renal said, and just talking about that piazza. The purpose for it is, as you guys have described, you're avoiding curb cuts, which I think is wonderful, and bringing it off the alley, but that's dedicating a lot of space really for the car. I know you're trying to incorporate human beings, but predominantly the reason for that is the car. And I'm wondering, in the same kind of spirit of what you described, you have such a big site and you have some planned flexibility. Can't you pull the car and this whole kind of, I know you call it a piazza, but it's really more like a portico sheer. Why not pull it into the building, out of the public realm, as a way of not letting the car dominate the human realm, and use that kind of bigger plan? Because within that, I think there's also an opportunity to even go a little bit further with what you've been suggesting, as you talked about the tower moving eastward, because there's going to be a building by Cedar Street to your west. Well, I would encourage you to keep going east with the building so that you reaffirm just the urban scale and public realm, because the danger in moving away from the street, it starts to blur the lines between urban life and suburban life. And I think that's a slippery slope that we have to be careful about. And then just the last comment is, I know most projects avoid the L, but I think the elevated train, is such an important part of our strata in our city. And I think we need to celebrate it and not turn our back on it. I'm wondering, you can see in the loop, like there's been so many gestures where, and I used to work in an office that was on the L level, and it was an active part of just the view, both from train travelers and from our office. But I think to explore opportunities where that strata in your building can be more active, just like you're doing at the ground level, and not just the screen for the car. If there's any unique programmatic idea that allows a window for train travelers into the world that's going on in your building, which is a big building, is something I would just encourage you to explore as an alternative.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's a good suggestion.
Hannah, I think I saw your hand up next.
Hi. My comments are on the ground floor. I do agree with what's been said from Ronald and Juan as well about making the frontage along Lake Street as well as the corner of Lake and Elizabeth a lot more interesting and marketable. I think the retail having entrances on the north and south may work, but really what we want to do is activate this plaza to the east of it, correct? And so I think, the more that the restaurant or the retail flows into the plaza, and then the community can come right up to it. I think there's kind of it's trying to do two things, which is kind of have these planters shield the retail, but also not keep the pedestrians separate. I think we want this to be an urban condition where the retail is spilling out. There is no barrier between the people walking by. It's a really active corner. You could have artwork there. Maybe the height of this can be even more voluminous so that it really is celebrating kind of the procession of people coming off of Lake Street around the building. It gets treated more like an entry sequence instead of just a kind of an attachment to the building. And so I think, that whole corner can be explored a lot more. If we can integrate something really unique, whether it be in the columns, that the facade, how the building is above you, whether it be lighting at nighttime as well. I think that whole corner really needs to turn from the L and into your site a lot more. And so that kind of procession is more celebrated. I also have I'm a little bit worried about the safety of the driveway right next to the sidewalk. Like if you had a small child and they're walking by themselves, the plants are honestly taller than at this point, and they are walking into the piazza, which has no curb, which I agree, like having that porosity when there are no cars is really interesting and important perhaps, but I think there is a little bit of a danger in having these openings and treating it similar to a true plaza, because it really is car centric. And I think your planters and everything is kind of in the way of that. Also, we have 593 units. I bet you half of those units are going to have dogs. So you have 200 plus dogs every day through this site coming in and out multiple times a day. I do also think you need to protect your planters and think about where they're going when they first leave the building, where they're relieving themselves, and making sure that all of these planters are protected, because you have some planters that go right down to the ground, and we all know that is the survivability on those plants are next to nil if that's the case. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I think that's all great feedback. I agreed. We could probably strengthen more of the kind of portal connection from that corner straight into the piazza space, and thinking about that a bit further. So we'll certainly study that. And in terms of the porosity, so we've been playing a little bit with the limits of the landscape ordinance, because ordinarily as a vehicular space, that piazza would need to have, a 7-foot wide landscape buffer and a fence completely kind of cutting it off from the sidewalk. And so this was kind of an ongoing discussion with DPD, but their desire was really to say, okay, let's maybe go away from that and make it feel a bit more porous and not kind of cut off from the life of the street. And so while we can certainly kind of study that a bit further, that was sort of where that was coming from, but appreciate the comments.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, John. I see your hand next.
Yeah, can you go to page 14? I'm wondering if there's a good reason you couldn't extend the retail across the full Lake Street frontage. Maybe not the full 3 bays, but even 1 or 2 bays would serve to activate Lake Street.
I think it's something we can look at. Obviously we all know that the depth of a retail space is important in terms of its usability, as well as keeping that retail at, a certain square footage to not kick in an additional loading dock, and making sure that it can be rented and used. So I think that's some of the concerns, having it be too narrow if it's actually able to be usable and rentable. We don't want just vacant retail. So we really thought about the depth of that retail, making sure that that was all usable retail and clean, kind of, even though the tower is angled, keeping the space of the retail really rectilinear and rentable. But something we can definitely look at.
Are you imagining one retail tenant or multiple?
I don't think I'm not sure that we know that at this point.
Well, that relates directly to the shape of the space and the depth of it, whether it's 1 or multiple,
Mhm.
so.
I think right now we're allowing for flexibility. I mean, obviously it could be one, I think, could be, yeah.
Most retailers would want more street frontage, not less. And so,
Mhm.
like if you took off the back bay and put 3
Mhm.
spots there, but stretched it across the whole Lake Street frontage, you would
Right,
have more retail frontage and the retail would be more valuable. You'd have a few
Right.
less parking spots.
that is true, yeah. I think also a 60-foot retail depth is what's ideal for retail usually, so that's what we're looking at achieving there. We're at about 60 feet right now. But yeah, you can definitely study that as well.
I think, Brian, I see your hand next.
Hi, so thank you for the presentation to both the designers and the developers. It sounds like you've gone through a lot of work with DPD to arrive at where you are right now. And I'll just say personally, I'm familiar with all the challenges that you guys face in terms of cost, approvals, market assumptions, and all those sorts of things that really can affect the project. And so when we had the discussion with the Committee on Design, there was actually quite a bit of concern about the project. But an overriding concern is how can the Committee of Design be helpful to you, and rather than just criticize you and send you off on a wild goose chase, right? So I come back to the fact that this district, this neighborhood is an incredible story for Chicago. And, it's vibrant, it's pedestrian, people moved in, offices, work has moved in, and it's an amazing neighborhood that continues to grow. And my question to both the designers and developers would be, what are you doing for this project that actually contributes and enhances the neighborhood? And I know that you're adding lots of people and lots of places to live and some retail and some open space. But I think that if you thought about it from a development point of view, you'd have to say to yourselves that there's certainly lots of competition. And how would you market the project? What is the narrative that you're going to be able to describe this project as being special? And what, frankly, value does it create for the neighborhood besides more people, more taxes? Is it a great living condition, a situation where those units are incredible units and there's common spaces and amenities, and that it's a place that you don't move out of because you develop a sense of community? Or is it just the same as everybody else, and it's someplace that people just search for the newest and latest thing and they move right out, and you have to renovate it and spend all that money to renovate it? Is it about the ground level activities in terms of food, retail, community programs, open space, art, landscape? I just kind of don't quite understand the story behind the project, because to me, the story behind the project should be expressed in how you develop the building. And I know we can talk about the piazza, and I think actually you could probably, with proper programming, turn it into a audit court. Let it be an audit court, and when it's raining and snowing, and other times you could keep people out and develop great programming there. You could probably stretch retail along the parking garage, and even probably reduce parking. Those are all reasonable things to ask of yourselves. Would people really be driving that many cars? I know you're trying to protect yourself, but it does affect the quality of that human scale environment at the ground. I think the biggest question, though, was for the tower, because to me, the tower massing was kind of okay. You broke it down. There's a bend in it. It dropped down in scale so that as you approach it, moving east to west and see the building, or see it from downtown or from the western areas, it seems to have some articulation and scale. Although I guess you probably are imagining that the Cedar Street building would block the west, but the west is going to get pretty brutal sunshine, and so you have a broad facade there. But I guess the bigger question is, besides the massing, is really, what does a tower represent as and its character and personality. And right now, it just seems that, particularly in Scheme 1, it's just kind of a little bit of a slightly uninspired collage of lots of different elements.
Mhm.
And I think, probably 2 seems to be a little bit better, but you should not think of the facade treatment as just being responses to DPD in terms of, well, let's change it from horizontal to vertical, let's push it in, or let's change the material here or the spacing there. It can't be just decoration. I think that you have to, personally, I think you have to have an idea that, along with the development team, really says that, what is this building about? Is it about balconies? Could you show it on some but don't show on others? And so is there an idea about being able to connect with outdoors and nature? There's obviously a very famous building here in Chicago that had a very standard plan, but an incredible sort of expression of balconies that define the whole building. Is it about opening up the spaces internal to your plan? Because right now you have an interior corridor that doesn't daylight and it's tucked into the core, and so there's no kind of sense of relief. It's pretty ordinary. Do you express the programs of either the units, the modules, or the circulation, or the common spaces? It's a pretty tall building, so do you express the structure in terms of how that might actually have some sort of quality that says that I am a tall building and it takes a lot of effort to hold me up, and I'm going to be proud of that and really soar? Is it sustainable systems? You talked about some elements, but could you actually aspire to net zero? And could the envelope be a performative envelope that's more than just spandrel glass, vision glass, and low window to solid wall ratio? I think that to me, if you started to think about that in terms of how you would tell the story of this building to others and have them come to live in this building, I think that would go a long way in terms of you being able to then convince not only the city, but the committee, and really people that might be looking at this as an option of where to live, of why they would actually choose this. Many people are really concerned about health and wellness. Should this building really support that in some way? So I kind of leave it at that, for you, that lots of work, I'm sure that you guys worked really hard in the project. But I just think it needs a bigger idea.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Do any other committee members have any comments? I want to make sure. Yes. Hi, Sarah.
Yeah, I think I'm just going to echo what Brian brought up, and there were actually a couple other committee members that weren't able to join the public session, but were bringing up these concerns of just a lack of coherence about the outside of the building in particular, and also a question that where the expression changes on the northeast perspective view, it just seems a little bit arbitrary, and it makes the building look quite top heavy just with the way it's expressed. And I think that is something that the team could probably look at to maybe rethink that a little and try to, figure out how to make this building a little bit more unique and special, but also if maybe it's just a purer, more coherent expression that it needs.
Understood.
All right. I believe that should be it. I know sometimes we have issues with our Zoom hands, but I believe that might be it. So, all right, thank you, Team BKL. I think we will move on to the second item on the agenda. And
Thank you,
so-
everyone. Thank you for your time. Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Bye.
And so if the next applicant team can go ahead and start bringing up your screen to share, I'll go ahead and go over the summary. The Ave, located at 3601 to 3625 West Chicago Avenue, located in the Humboldt Park community area in the 27th Ward, is a proposed mixed-use development consisting of a 30,000 square foot site located along West Chicago Avenue between North Central Park Avenue and North Monticello Avenue. I don't know how Chicago pronounce that word. The applicant is proposing to build by right within a B3-2 community shopping district. The project will be a 4-story, 49-foot tall mixed-use building with 49 affordable units, 7,700 square feet of commercial and community space, and 32 parking spaces and a community plaza. To any committee members who are associated with this project, if you have not yet, please recuse yourself at this time and for the duration of the review for this project. To the presenters, please clearly state your name and your relation to the project prior to speaking. You have 15 to 20 minutes to present your proposal. Committee members, please hold your comments and questions until after the presentation. And then once the presentation is ready, preferably full screen if possible, please state your name prior to speaking.
This is Brian Kidd from Gensler, and I'm getting this up to speed here. Let me just.
Thanks, Brian. Hi, my name is Bill Williams with KMW Communities. I think my partner, Julie DeGraff from POA, is on the line.
Got it.
I don't see her. Maybe she had a conflict at the last minute.
I can see, but it's a PDF. Yeah.
You're not able to do full screen. I think that's okay.
If Brian, if you want, I can do it from my side, but you will have to prompt me when you would like me to move on.
Yeah. For some reason.
My apologies, we're having some technical difficulties. This is Julie DeGraff from Preservation of Affordable Housing, and I'm here with my colleague, Bill Eager, and we appreciate the opportunity to present today.
Brian, you can click on the X on the page thumbnails, up top. Right in front of page thumbnails, there's an X.
Okay.
Yeah, right.
Got it.
Sorry, Brian, Control L should also put you into full screen mode if you'd like to try that too.
Yeah.
Or if you're on a Mac, I think Command L.
Is that full screen now? No.
No.
It is not, but I think we can go ahead and then during review, we can ask for.
Let me just go here to my desktop and share that. Okay.
Perfect. Yep. Great.
Awesome. Sorry about that.
Thanks, Brian. I think I will lead off this presentation. As John mentioned, this project is located at 3601 West Chicago Avenue, commonly known as the Ave. Here's our agenda for the day. Before we get into it, I'd like to introduce our team. We have POA as part of the development team, KMW, and the design team is Gensler, Nia, and Site. And we have DLA Piper as our land use attorney. I don't know if anyone on the team want to make a formal introduction. If not, we can just move on. You want to move to the next slide, Brian? Oh, technical difficulties. Julie, you were saying something?
Gonna get off this.
We're good, Bill, with your introduction. Thank you.
Get to the next slide. I'm sorry. I'm trying to get to the next slide and it's not working here.
Brian, let me take over. If
All right, you take over.
Someone can
I
help
will
me
stop sharing.
allow me to be the sharer, and then Brian, during the presentation, just prompt me to move to the next slide.
Got it. My Mac is not working well with the Zoom.
Okay, I think this is the next page. Here we go. So I was mentioning that partner is POA and KMW is the primary developers on this project along with the community. And this project is one of the Invest Southwest sites. And the goal of this site was to bring investment, bring attention, bring and activate this side of West Humboldt Park, and also provide an elevated affordable housing. The project consists of 70,000 square feet. And within that project, we'll have 49 affordable apartments and 7,800 square feet of retail. And the project will be anchored by a longstanding neighborhood institution, neighborhood housing services that provide housing services and preservation for the neighborhood. And we're excited to get this project going because it's a much needed West Humboldt Park that will hopefully spur other developments and complement other efforts that we're doing in the neighborhood. So I'll turn it over to Brian now and the design team, and just prompt me when you go to the next slide. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks, Bill. Thank you again. My name is Brian Kidd. I'm with Gensler in Chicago. The project is located in Humboldt Park. Go to the next slide. Located along West Chicago Avenue, 3600 West Chicago. Located right on the street there between Central Park Avenue and Monticello Avenue. Couple of the local developments or buildings. There's the Kelly Hall YMCA to the west, and the Roe Clark Math and Science Academy also to the west. The site is currently zoned B32. We're looking at upzoning it to B33, mostly because of the number of units. We are looking at trying to do this project as not a PD and making it as a right zoning with an upzone to B33 just to allow the number of units. A B32 would allow us to do 48 units, but we're looking at doing 49 units, and that would require this slight upzone to accomplish that. The site, as Bill had mentioned before, is currently the NHS office, which is formerly, I believe, a gas station that was on the site. That is along Central Park Avenue. And then there is a city-owned building directly to the west. The little diagram there that is the school. B is some existing buildings that front along Chicago Avenue. It's a combination of 2- and 3-story buildings along that, and then directly across Central Park again are some smaller retail with residential up above on the second floor. The existing property, the 3613 building is owned by the city, and then the 3601 is the NHS office. We are looking at combining both of the sites, vacating the alley that is between the two sites, and dedicating a new alley that exits towards Central Park. This is sort of a mixture of alleys that come all the way out to Chicago Avenue versus sort of cutting and not having any curb cuts along Chicago Avenue. So we are wanting to basically combine the two sites, create no curb cuts along Chicago Avenue, and extend the building to front the entire block on Chicago Avenue. This was perhaps the beginning of the concept development, just avoiding a simple bar building that is massed, to sort of build out the entire site. Next one. Early in the development, 3 different concepts were looked at. Scheme A is a much taller building. Scheme B was where we created the separation between some of the uses, more commercial retail development along the east side of the site versus Scheme C, which was the one that was developed, created a longer building that has multiple components associated with it. Some of the design intent was to hold the corners. Corners are very important for this site. And then carve out this space in the middle to reduce the height along Central Park Avenue, reduce the height on Chicago, and provide some relief on Chicago Avenue. And then started to carve away at the building to open up the building in the center to create this this plaza and this welcoming area in the center of the building, kind of wrapping our arms around this plaza in the middle of the block. The corner is the along Central Park Avenue and Chicago Avenue. This was the tallest portion of the project. We wanted to create a stronger presence on one corner of the building. Next. And then along the west side of the block, having a longer frontage along Chicago Avenue that also kind of steps down to Monticello along the west side. And then in the middle, what is being described as the stoop. It's sort of the public area. It is one of the main features of the project, a gathering place for the development. Granted, we have not developed this area as fully as we want to. We are still working on some program elements, and we're challenging our landscape architect site design to come up with a way in which this site or this plaza can be used in multiple ways. It's a public gathering spot. It is a place that we can change the artwork. This screen wall that's you know, sort of one of the features here wants to be able to be changed. We're thinking about some sort of screen wall with a paint coating that would allow us to project items on this that could be changed, and they could be used to celebrate different times of the year, different artists in the neighborhood, different things that make Humboldt Park unique and special, while serving as a backdrop to some of the events that could occur here. And we're thinking, you know, farmers markets, sidewalk sales, music, entertainment, other things that might happen in this space, and that's what we want the landscaping to be able to incorporate and reflect the different things that can happen here. So we're going to make this a very hardworking space that can be transformed to be able to accommodate different functions and features. And we've called this the stoop. It's sort of that welcoming gathering place that you can hang out. And then that sort of led to this idea that we create the porch at the second floor. Originally, the second floor was going to have more commercial space, and because of its location and sort of the challenge of incorporating a lot of retail in this area, as well as NHS realized that they didn't quite need as much space as they had originally foreseen. And so we moved some of those spaces down to the ground floor to activate that first floor area. And so we have the NHS offices, we have some commercial retail space, and then we also have management offices, and then a space that's going to be shared by both the NHS and management offices. Yeah, and so the NHS space was originally on the corner of Central Park, and that occupied 2 floors over there. That space has been moved down towards Monticello Avenue. The original concept had a 5-story building on the corner of Central Park and Chicago, and then the rest of the building was a 4-story building. We've changed that a little bit based on some of the revised program, and also an attempt to try and utilize maybe a less expensive construction type, which would be limited to 4 stories. So we have altered some of the space. Next slide. And this is the revised concept, and the next slide sort of illustrates how we got there. So we removed 1 floor of the 5-story building, so it's all 4 stories, but we still want to accentuate the height of that side of the building. So we're talking about having a taller floor-to-floor height for that 4th floor on the corner there, as well as maybe an exaggerated parapet. We moved the NHS space down towards the west, and incorporated residential units in that second floor space. And we still like the idea that we are creating this sort of porch area that can be activated for the residents that live on that floor, green space, plantings and activity that occurs up on that level. So just as an overview of the development program, we have 49 affordable units. Every unit in the building is affordable. We actually originally started with 44 units, and we were able to increase the number of units because we took over that second floor space and reduce the overall square footage space in the building, and we're able to get this to be all work within the 4-story building. We have about 2,900 square feet for the NHS office, 4,800 of commercial space, and we have 32 parking spaces that are accessed off of Central Park Avenue. Some of the sustainable features we're considering, some solar panels, some green roofs. We're looking at possibility of incorporating some vegetable and herb gardens on some of the roofs. The potential to do some beehives or other types of features that could occur up, up on the top of the building. We're also, exploring other sustainable features, low flow plumbing fixtures, and on-site energy production with the solar panels, and potentially some hot water heating as well. Community gardens would really just be for the building. It's not really urban farms in the sense of a large scale production, but the idea that we could have things that could be utilized as part of a farmer's market, that could be utilized by residents in the building, or part of the NHS office services that could be incorporated into the building. Just going over the ground floor plan, sort of illustrating how the parking comes in off of Central Park. We have a loading dock that's located off the alley. We're showing the new 18-foot public alley that comes off the existing alley out towards Central Park. We have a commercial space along the corner at Central in Chicago. The management office is shown in blue next to that, allows them to oversee the events because they're going to be programming what happens in that plaza area. And then in the purple there is shown some of the shared spaces that would be used between the NHS office and the management office as well. We were asked to look at a couple different concepts for how that active use could be incorporated along the corner at Central Park and Chicago Avenue. The current scheme shows that management office overlooking the plaza, and then the retail commercial space occupying the corner. Option A is showing what might happen if the commercial space occurs all along Chicago Avenue. It sort of limits the visibility from the management office out to the plaza. And then in the option B, which was soundly rejected by our client, they really want to be off of that pedestrian plaza area. So that didn't really work for them at all. But we did explore some options.
I just wanted to interrupt. We have about 5 minutes left on this.
Okay. This illustrates the second floor plan, which is all residential units. There's a couple private terraces off of Monticello Avenue. The building does set back along Monticello, so it steps up and kind of responds to the lower residential buildings that are along Monticello. Outdoor amenity deck, which is accessed both with from fitness and from a hallway that connects to the main hallway, that would allow different outdoor activities to occur out there, including some vegetable gardens. And then we have a couple of private terraces there. Third floor is all residential units, and we're sort of illustrating the mixture of 1, 2s, and 3-bedroom units that are occurring here. And then the fourth floor. illustrating some of the materials that we're considering here, brick, wood, metal, concrete. This sort of illustrates the construction techniques that we're talking about here, which would be for the most part wood frame for the interior of the project with non-combustible exterior. This is illustrating the screen wall that again would have these projections on it. We are thinking about having some windows that would allow, as residents are going down the hallway, to have some visual access out into the space, creating some interest and also, keeping that plaza area safe at all times of the day and night. And this is a little illustration of what happens on the inside, allowing these views out. Some elevations, north elevation, which is facing Chicago Avenue. The North Street elevation sort of showing the scale of the project. It is, most of that Chicago Avenue is combined of 2- and 3-story buildings. The west elevation, east elevation, and then again showing the relative scale that happens. And some views looking from the porch out to this plaza area. And then sort of celebrating the stoop. And then this is the corner at Monticello with the NHS office and showing the setbacks. This is part of a bigger effort to sort of look at what happens along Chicago Avenue, and this is part of the developments that could be occurring along Chicago Avenue, and hopefully spurring some additional development here. And this would be the first phase of that development, with future phases coming in a little bit further to the west and to the east. And that is the corner. Wanted to address just one last thing, which was some of these battered walls, angled walls that are occurring down at the ground floor. We are still looking and playing around with that, maybe thinking about narrowing these things up so that there's a little more visibility out towards the plaza area. There has been some discussion about maybe incorporating some seating at the bottom of this. When we had commercial space up on the second floor, we were not as concerned about security, but we do want to make sure that nobody can essentially run up these ramps to get up to the second floor. I know that I would have been tempted as a child to do that. And I think that's the final slide. Thank you.
Perhaps keep it up just in case folks might have questions or comments on the project.
Sure. Am I still sharing or not?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. If someone could share, and then unless you lost privileges for whatever reason, just let me know.
Sure.
Okay. Committee members, the floor is now yours for comments and questions to the applicant. Just raise your Zoom hand and we'll call on you. Thanks. Leslie? You're muted.
Thanks, Josh. Haven't done that in a while. This is a really exciting project. Thank you so much for your presentation. I'm thrilled with all the improvements that are going to take place in the coming years along Chicago Avenue. And I'm really happy with the way that this project is shaping up. I really appreciate the thoughtful approach that you've taken with the massing of the building, and really, paying attention, really holding the corner and keeping the street wall intact, and then playing with a geometry that's, very creative and also responsive to the spaces that you're planning for the interior of the building. I think the alley access that you've created with the new alley is also important for circulation to the back of the building and parking. So I think that that's a nice gesture. The only comments that I have really are, And Brian, you kind of talked about this, is the angled walls that, potentially need refinement. And part of that is articulation of the residential entry and entry into the innovation space that is located off of Chicago Avenue. Just cautionary tale about the Innovation Center and how that's going to be programmed and managed. We would prefer that the space be activated as often as possible. And what we're learning is for community rooms and innovation centers, especially on the front of the building, that the glass part looks cool, but the amount of time they're actually programmed, you're looking in on an empty room. So hopefully, having some conversations with NHS about how the room is going to be programmed, you can alleviate that. The other piece that I notice is on the elevations. The south elevation right now is, a pretty noticeable blank wall. I'm assuming that because you're still sort of early on in the design process, that you'll look at that and start thinking about how to, make that more, have as much detail and responsiveness to design as you have for the remaining elevations. There's, when you look at this page, there's just a lot of blank brick. So, I would just, take a look at that. And I'm sure that, as you go through the design process, that you'll pay close attention to that. The other comment I had is about the second floor space. I know, Brian, in your presentation, you mentioned that NHS was first located on one corner of the building and moved over to the other corner. I would just look at what the elevation, what that means for the elevation. When the second floor space now on Chicago and Central Park, where NHS is now residential units, it still looks like office fenestration. So, what that means. And then similarly on the Monticello and Chicago Ave, still looks like, that needs to be coordinated with the fenestration, and the building architecture need to be coordinated with the new program in terms of, floor to floor height, in terms of how, you have these really nice large openings for the residential. It still sort of looks like office on the second floor. And then I know you mentioned site was a part of your team. So, the plaza, I think, could be really interesting. And I'm sure that going through the design process, that site is gonna take a close eye to that. But I really like the movable art. And I think that the use of the roof plane to generate energy, and even though it's non-occupiable green roof space, I think the sustainable strategies that have been incorporated into this building are a model for a lot of the other buildings that we look at that have neglected to, add those in. So thank you for your efforts there. Nice project.
Thank you.
Sarah?
Thank you. I think I'm going to continue the compliments here about this project. It's a very interesting treatment of the massing, and it's subtle, and yet it kind of adds something interesting and different, and also contextual. The use of the feature wall is really nice. I would say that, as was discussed, the little bit fortress-like walls at the ground level could use a little bit more refinement, and we just want to make sure that they don't look uninviting and that the entry is very inviting. But these are details. Overall, the project is very nice, and I compliment you on it.
Thank you.
Are there any other comments from committee members? Yes, Brian?
I'll just make a couple of comments. One is a question. Did you study looking at the garage entry off the alley? Could you?
We did look at that a little bit. There were some concerns about sort of overloading that alley. So we thought access might be better if we didn't use the alley. We are having 32 spaces in the building, some of which is going to be occupied by NHS, as well as basically for some of the residents as well.
Mm-hmm. So it's trying to be considerate to the neighborhood that uses.
Yeah,
the
we,
alley. Yeah.
we were a little concerned about trying, not overloading this alley that is mostly by residents in the neighborhood, whether they're single family homes or there's some two flats in the neighborhood as well. Not to overload the alley. We could do that if needed, but we did prefer to have that entrance coming in off of Central Park, and it is further away from the intersection, and it's basically right adjacent to the alley.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's just, noticeable that there's a curb cut right next to the alley. So the project, I think, is a very good example of a kind of well-planned, pioneer mixed-use development. It doesn't overwhelm the scale of the neighborhood. And adding that density, and the programs, I think, are really great. In fact, I kind of thought that the added floor was still okay too. So, but as long as you're able to get as many units as you want. Did you guys consider having it taller to get more units, or was that 49 a target, not more?
Actually, 44 was the target, and we were able to accomplish, once we had sort of refined what the program was going to be, and pushing the building slightly to the south further, we were able to accomplish everything that we wanted to accomplish in the 4 stories. It also, it's affordable housing. We're trying to be as careful as possible with cost here, and by adding that 5th floor, that put us into a different construction type, which would have been more expensive.
Right. Yeah, no, I think that it's nicely, like I said, nicely planned. Are there balconies or sliding doors or any of those things on that? I noticed in some of the earlier schemes you had some deeper recesses. So I just encourage you not to kind of flatten things out.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
We have balconies that show up in the plans, mostly on the corner units and also at the second floor. And they're a little hard to see, but there is some balconies that have been incorporated throughout the project.
Yeah, these are all small quibbles. So congratulations. I think it's a very positive proposal.
Thank you.
Arnold, I see your hand next.
Yeah, thanks, Josh, and Brian and team again, echoing, everyone else's sentiments. Congratulations on a well thought out, project. Really only 2, really I want maybe questions, maybe comments, take them however you wish. On the parking level, just kind of piggybacking on Brian, just notice the location of the service, dock, being positioned off of the alley, and wondering if maybe that's a little too disconnected, if you start to think about operationally how, residents, tenants will move in, and move out, needing to, traverse, the parking aisle, and wondering if there's an opportunity to maybe create a little bit more, connectedness, between, the service side and service elevators or even the commercial tenants, on the ground floor as well. So it looks like somebody's cycling back. So yeah, again, it's like I said, it's obviously a comment for, further, review again in the larger scheme of things. It's early in the.
Yeah, we did consider putting it closer to the elevators, but that would create more of curb cuts along Central Park Avenue, and eliminating parking spaces. So we're trying to be, it's a very tiny footprint, and we're trying to be as careful as possible and utilizing, like, that would typically just be an unused corner in the parking garage, and utilizing that as the loading area and traversing, like you said, through the parking area in order to get to the elevators is a bit of a compromise, but it avoided, creating more of an issue along Central Park Avenue.
All right, no, duly noted. And then the only other, question that I had, cycling back to Chicago Avenue elevation, the second floor of the taller mass, some of the balconies or the balcony that's there, is that just a remnant of the earlier scheme, or is the intent to preserve, you know, that look now that that entire floor is all residential?
It's a great question. And we sort of thought that through ourselves, you know, should this remain and does it make sense to have as much balcony at that level as we're currently showing? And we like we like the form of the building that had this sort of separation or reveal between the ground floor and the upper levels of the residential. I think it was a fair comment that we need to make that look less like a commercial space and more of a residential space. And that might mean just changing the fenestration in such a way so that it does not look as commercial as it is. But we like the idea that, you know, we have this sort of outdoor space and this second floor porch area that creates a little more active and interesting space, and we can incorporate some landscaping and outdoor activities for the residents at that level.
No, thanks for that. But again, like I said, overall, you know, congrats on a very well thought out and well planned development.
Thank you.
All right. I will ask again if any committee members have any more additional comments or questions. Okay. And if not, I guess we'll end the meeting. So before we adjourn, on behalf of DPD, thank you again for all of your critical thinking and thoughtful comments on these two important projects. The meeting will now come to a close. Thank you all for attending and sharing your thoughts. We hope you come back next month.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all. All right. Be well. Take care.